welcome to What the Hype. I'm Andrew.
I'm Eric.
I'm Micah.
And I'm Laura.
And turn on your lamplight and grab your favorite toy, because this week we are looking at the wonderful world of Disney's Pixar. Y'all, I came prepared today. I got a Pizza Planet jacket I got from Disneyland. I got this Pixar ball from Pixar Studios themselves.
Aw.
So I'm ready for some fun today.
Andrew, that's the coolest jacket I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's cool, right? It's a nice bomber jacket.
I had pizza tonight for dinner, if that makes you feel better.
That was good. That was appropriate for today's episode of What
Yeah.
the Hype. What kind of pizza was it?
Grandma's.
Grandma's pizza. That's so
Your
sweet.
grandmother has a recipe for
Yes.
nice, lovely. Well, I want to point out to the listeners that we are, unlike Pixar, we've not been around for 25 years, and we are a new show, so we do need your support on the social medias. Please follow us in your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. We're at youtube.com/whatthehypepodcast or @whatthehypepodcast. Also, leave us a review.
We're also on TikTok, Twitch, and Instagram as What the Hype Podcast. Our website is whatthehypepodcast.com. On X, we are What the Hype Show. And if you want to email us about anything, you can do that at whatthehypepodcast@gmail.com. You can also contact us through our website.
And does a friend or a family member need an introduction to Pixar, or do they want to just learn more? You can share this episode with a friend and tell them that we're walking through every aspect of pop culture each and every week.
Yeah, we're a new show, so we appreciate any way that you can help us grow and thrive. And by the way, before we jump into this Pixar discussion, just wanted to say that one of our friends, John, over at the true crime podcast Shaken and Disturbed, is very kindly going to promote What the Hype on his podcast. So we thought we would return the favor. And on his show with his bestie, Darren Karp, they break down the case, they connect the dots, and they try to make it enjoyable along the way. So check out Shaken and Disturbed wherever you get your podcasts. And I'm just glad Toy Story 3 didn't end up having to be an episode of Shaken and Disturbed, because the way that movie was ending, I really thought they were going to kill off some characters.
Yeah.
I had my exit route planned in the theater when it started looking like things were
You know
going
what they
to
say
really...
for the sequels, you got to up the stakes. You got to up the stakes.
You know, there are elements of Coco that could potentially apply.
Oh, Coco's a
Yes.
good one.
Certainly, it's a great example.
Laura, this seems like a podcast that's right up your alley.
True crime and Pixar.
Honestly, I would love that crossover. So if anyone wants to do a true crime Pixar crossover episode of What the Hype, count me in. Maybe we can get John on as the Shaken and Disturbed guest, right? So we can bring these things together. Oh, I love it. Micah, you
I'm
just inspired a whole genre. I hope you know.
You're sick. I'm sure John would be up for that. So how did Pixar come to be what it is today? Our beautiful animated story begins in 1979 with the Graphics Group. This was a part of Lucasfilm's computer division, and this group of engineers and computer scientists was dedicated to pushing the boundaries of computer graphics technology. But it wasn't until 1986 that Pixar as we know it began to take shape. Enter Steve Jobs, of all people, best known today as the CEO of Apple. There was a time decades ago when he was actually ousted from Apple, and Jobs was looking for new ventures, and he saw potential in the graphics group and purchased it from Lucasfilm for $5 million and renamed it Pixar, which is objectively a sexier name than graphics group. So already they were off to a good start.
You don't like Gigi?
Double G.
That's what I would have called it. Or double G.
And with Jobs' vision and funding, Pixar started developing cutting-edge animation technology and producing short films to showcase their capabilities. And some examples of those short films are 1986's Luxo Jr., which was released with Toy Story 2, and Tin Toy, double T, which was on the home release of Toy Story.
I remember seeing Tin Toy on that home release, and I was still like blown away, obviously blown away by Toy Story, but it's amazing that this company's been pushing the envelope and has done nothing but continue to do that since we started hearing about them.
Yeah, and a fun part of Pixar movies even today is that they typically have a short film before them. So you get 2 movies for the price of 1 ticket. So things changed in 1991. Pixar struck a game-changing deal with Disney, and this was a $26 million agreement in which they were going to produce 3 computer animated feature films. The first of these was, of course, Toy Story, released in 95. It was the world's first entirely computer animated feature film. It was a massive hit, both critically and commercially, and marked the beginning of a new era in animation. And then over the next decade, Pixar released a string of successful films, including A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, Monsters, Inc., Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, hit after hit after hit after hit. And each film not only showcased Pixar's technical prowess, but also their knack for compelling storytelling and character development. And then things really changed when Disney purchased Pixar in 2006 for $7.4 billion. And that basically puts them where they are today. And I just gave everybody a timeline. And as y'all can tell, and as I'm sure y'all remember, Pixar really was a big part of our childhoods and our formative years. Does anyone have a sort of earliest Pixar memory?
I was still young enough when Toy Story came out that it changed fundamentally how I interacted with my toys. Like I still had a number of either like action figures or stuffed animals even that were I would basically like tuck them in now all of a sudden because I was nervous they would get angry at me if I just left them like on the floor or whatever, that kind of a thing. And I don't have a memory of going to see Toy Story, whether it was in theaters or home video, but I do remember being excited before the second movie came out because I remember seeing the trailer. So between 96 and like 98 or something is probably when I first saw. So it changed my world.
So were you convinced your toys were coming alive when you were out of the room?
Basically. I basically like I was already susceptible to that because I had like a wild imagination, but just like the movie solidified it for sure. It was like, oh, this is a true story. And what Sid is doing, the neighbor kid, is true crime. And this is all real.
That is a good example of true crime in Toy Story.
Mm-hmm.
There it is.
Honestly, I think there is strong crossover potential here. I do want to ask, did anyone after seeing Toy Story, because I vividly remember this, did anyone go home and feel like I need to write my name on the feet of every single one of my toys?
I was kind of in luck because my name's Andrew, and if I had Woody and Buzz, I think they actually wrote the name Andy on the bottom of the
Oh,
foot.
that's cool.
That's
Yeah.
so sweet.
So
Yeah.
I have an interesting work story. We got an opportunity to go down to Disney to do a work training. This was probably more than 10 years ago at this point. And for your participation in like different parts of the training, the Disney person who was leading the particular session would give you like a little figurine. And there was one of the coworkers that I had, his name was Andy, and he ended up finally participating. And when the Disney person came up to him to give him his figurine, he says, Every Andy needs a Buzz Lightyear." And I
Oh,
just
that's
thought that was
sweet.
so on point. Like, even
Aw.
in that kind of work capacity, you're still kind of thinking,
Yeah, bringing out the inner child.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So not quite the same as writing your name on the bottom of your toys, but
Well, I think for most people it wouldn't work. I mean, I at least have a 4-letter name too, but I mean, Laura's 5. Like that. How tiny are these feet of these toys?
You need a
Listen,
pen.
yeah, I had to get creative about it. Sometimes it was just initials,
Initials.
if I had to account for room. But yeah, I definitely remember just feeling a greater sense of like almost kinship to my toys after I saw Toy Story.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
was really, really cool. And like I definitely felt more respect towards them. I don't know that I believe they were actually coming to life when I wasn't there, but I feel like I was a lot more respectful of them just in case.
Yeah.
That
Just in
matches.
case, you never know. Yeah, I kind of had a thought or two, like maybe they do come to life while I'm away. It was a thought I was considering, just in case. You never know.
for me, I was about 13 or so at the time that Toy Story came out. So what I remember most vividly is that it made animation cool. And
Mhm.
this is in no way a slight to traditional Disney, but for me, I think I was kind of outgrowing a lot of those types of films at the time. And to see something so new and so fresh and so character rich like Toy Story was awesome. And that was kind of my introduction to the world, like many
Yeah.
people.
There's
Taking
something
that step from 2D to 3D, I
Yeah,
think
and
you're talking about.
computer like developed graphics, the
Exactly.
fact that a lot of it's rendered in the computer. There's something
That's true.
inherently nerdy about
There is.
Pixar.
My earliest memory of a Pixar movie is not Toy Story 1, but actually going with my family to see Toy Story 2 in theaters. And across the street from the AMC was a TGI Fridays. So we got dinner there beforehand. And the reason this memory sticks with me is because for dessert at Fridays, I got one of those dirt and worms
I
desserts.
love those.
Yeah, well, I threw up during Toy Story 2 because of the dirt and worms dessert.
Oh,
I've never touched
Oh.
dirt and worms again, but I will always remember that time throwing up during Toy Story 2 because I got sick on a bad dessert at TGI
so
I-
nothing to
Fridays.
do with the quality of the movie you were taking in.
Oh no, I loved it. It was great,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
didn't love that dessert.
I thought it was going to be because of the fond memories that Andrew has of the three of us, including Eric, eating at a TGI Fridays in New York.
That's right. I'm surprised you went back in there after your horrible experience 6 years earlier.
I know. Let's go through a couple of terms that you should know to be a real Pixar fan. First of all, A113. This
Ugh.
is the classroom number used by character animation students at the California Institute of the Arts. Many of its alumni, including Pixar staff, have used the number in their professional works, so you'll see it appear a lot in Pixar movies. It's an established Easter egg at this point. Another term, Luxo Jr. That's the iconic Pixar lamp that also starred in its own short film, as we
Oh,
mentioned.
it's got a name.
And then there's the Pizza Planet truck, and more on that in a second. And then lastly, Emeryville, California. And to most people, this might be a seemingly random city in California over the bay from San Francisco, but this is actually the home of Pixar Studios. So if you hear somebody bring up Emeryville, it's probably because of Pixar. Now,
Cool.
what's one thing to know that would make you a real Pixar fan? Let's say you aren't right now and you're looking to convince your friends that you really are a Pixar fan. Pixar is known for its Easter eggs, but one has stood out more than any other, and that's the Pizza Planet truck. It was first given a starring role in the original Toy Story and has made an appearance in every Pixar film to date except for The Incredibles, the first Incredibles movie.
Wow.
I don't know the reason, but they dropped the Pixar ball. And
They need to drop The Incredibles.
no, that's a
Whoa.
great movie.
Shots fired.
Whether you'll actually see it for yourself in all the other Pixar movies is another question, because sometimes it's a blink and you'll miss a moment. You got to really keep your eyes peeled, because sometimes
It's on
just
the
like
shelf, in the shadows, in the background of
whizzing
it. Yeah.
by on a road. Like there's a high chance that you'll miss it.
I'm assuming there's a website somewhere that details out every time it appears.
Several.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. And a bonus fun fact that's related to this one, Pixar will often drop an Easter egg about a future Pixar film in their movies. And if you go to the Pixar wiki, it'll show you 42 times that they've done this to date, including in Inside Out too. So I just really appreciate all the Easter eggs they've done over the years.
This goes to what Eric was talking about earlier, the nerd aspect of it. Like, this is such a nerdy thing to do, to
Mhm.
basically foreshadow future films. It's another layer of creativity.
And considering that everything in every single shot was rendered, had to be built in a computer, you have complete control, more than you would of regular film, over the foreground, the background, the corners, the lighting. So you can really like play God with it and put it in, let's see, where's the most fun place we could store this Easter egg?
Yeah. Speaking of these forward-looking Easter eggs, my favorites are the Newt, Newt, not to be confused with Fantastic Beasts, Easter eggs. One appeared in Toy Story 3, another appeared in Brave. Newt ended up being a canceled Pixar movie. But at the time that these Easter eggs were designed for Toy Story 3 and Brave, it was still on the books. So these are Easter eggs
Oh.
for what ended up becoming a canceled project. I just love that. I think that's so cool. We're going to talk about the hallmarks of Pixar movies, but first, we're going to take a quick break and search for more Easter eggs. So we'll be right back. All right, let's go around the table here. What's one hallmark of Pixar movies that makes them stand out amongst other animated movies?
I think that they really push the boundaries, not just of obviously what technology is available, but emotional boundaries. The thing that I think of when I see Pixar and the whole trajectory is I've seen most of them and in theaters when they came out. Um, they always have a fresh perspective. They tell us something new about the world, like the world from the perspective of toys, the world from a perspective of that monster in our closet. you know, in fact, just kind of catching up on Pixar recently. I saw Turning Red, and the Inside Out sequel. All of it is just this amazing, fresh perspective. Wally did this. Really, it's just about finding meaning and telling a completely fresh story. Like Luca, for instance, too, different part of the world that you wouldn't ordinarily be seeing films about. And it just all, I think, makes us a more well read or wholesome people having seen these movies.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the Pixar movies have been across the board thought provoking, funny, and compelling for all audiences. And I think this is the part that's really stood out to me over the years, taking humor as an example. There's humor in the Pixar movies that will go right over a kid's head, but the
Mm.
parents will get it. It might be more adult skewed humor. So you watch, let's say, Toy Story 3 when you're 18 or younger than that, let's say 14, and then you watch it again when you're 30 and you're picking up different jokes that you didn't the first time. And I really think that is unique to Pixar because when I went to see, for example, the animated Super Mario Brothers movie, what was that last year? I didn't find it funny. Like I was excited for it.
Uh,
I love the world of Mario, but I wasn't laughing. If that was Pixar handling that, it would have been way funnier for adults.
I'll tell you something else that I just thought of when you're pointing out the humor in Pixar. There's also deep sadness in Pixar. I don't think any other animated film has ever made me cry like the first 7 minutes of Up.
Oh gosh.
You didn't cry during Mario when Bowser was singing about peaches?
I haven't seen that
Peaches,
movie
peaches.
yet, and I'm
What?
now inclined not to. Yeah, sorry.
No, it was good. It was good. You
It
should
was
see
good. If Wario had been in it, then maybe Andrew would have laughed a little bit more.
Yeah.
There's a
Well,
sequel coming, so don't worry.
But the deep sadness that I have felt, even in tender moments featuring characters that are nothing like myself, the human connection, and I mean, again, wordlessly, they got so good at it with Up that
Mm.
there's no dialogue, and you're seeing an entire life lived and loved. And if that doesn't move you,
Yeah, I'll definitely plus one that. I think their ability to tackle really tough subject matter in a way that is accessible and appropriate across all ages is really masterful. I mean, they deal with some pretty rough things. I mean, death, loss, infertility, eh, eh, moving away, losing friends.
generational trauma.
Yeah, like, Nemo's entire family being murdered before he even, like, hatched. I mean,
That's
there's
a
just
Disney problem, though, in general.
yeah.
Going back to Bambi.
Killing the parents.
That's true, that's true, but they're able to do it in a way that really resonates, I think, especially as someone who grew up with Pixar. Like, I've always been able to understand the story that they were trying to tell in a way that was appropriate for the age I was at the time.
Yep.
Like, it's really beautiful that you can go back and watch these movies now, and they hit in a very different way because we've all lived lives too, right?
Mm.
And we've experienced some of these difficult
That's such a great
themes
point.
Yeah.
I got a
So
perfect example of that. Last night I was watching A Bug's Life. Decided to go
Oh,
back, watch something
no.
very, very old. No, really. And first of all, it looks better than you remember. It's amazing what they can do with the expressiveness way back in before 2000. Bug's Life, turns out, is the most prescient, timely film for today's political climate between the oligarchs that run the government are the grasshoppers and the proletariat are the ants. And I was blown away by the symbolism in it that I thought I'd
Huh.
like make it straight to YouTube. It hits. It works.
yeah.
For me, and this kind of ties into pieces of what everybody was talking about, but it's the authenticity of the characters, the relatability factor. I was watching Inside Out, the first one earlier this week, and Riley is so relatable. Even though she's
Mm.
so young, what she's experiencing, what she's going through, and I know we're going to talk about Inside Out too, and probably can relate to more of what she's going through at this age. But other characters that came to mind, and they kind of run the gamut in terms of different movies that they were in and what they represent. But Eric, you were talking about Up earlier. Carl is such like an interesting character to see even his evolution at
Mhm.
his age from the start of the movie to the end of the movie. I love Mr. Potato Head from Toy Story.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Yeah.
and this just speaks to the fact like they can do serious, but they can also do funny. I loved Mama Coco from Coco.
Yeah.
Wally, the fact that you can do an entire movie with 17 lines of dialogue, but yet it still connects on a deeper level is amazing.
They were just bragging
Mm.
at that point.
Yeah.
They're like, look at what we can do.
Yeah, it speaks to the power of their storytelling that they can convey so much through visuals more than dialogue.
For sure. And I think to Eric's earlier point about A Bug's Life, Wally is another movie that becomes increasingly relevant as the years go by. And I
Oh, yeah.
remember seeing it in theaters actually with you, Andrew.
Oh,
And because you had already seen it and you were like, we have to go. It's so good. So we
Aw.
we all went
I
and
totally remember that.
Micah, I think you were there too, actually.
Oh, yeah, I remember
Was in
that
That's right. Are you
too.
Dallas.
taking Pixar movies?
Just the once.
Where
I
was
mean,
this? What
I think it
city?
was Dallas. Am I
Oh,
misremembering? But,
No, that sounds right because that was 2008, Portis, the Harry Potter conference.
right, exactly.
Jim
Another
Dale
nerd
came
thing
too.
that we do. Yeah, Jim Dale came to see Wally with us. But, like, I remember at the time being like, "Wow, this is such a statement about our world and
Yeah.
where it's going, and holy cow, if it's not 20 times more relevant now
Yeah.
than it was when it
Yes.
came out. It's crazy."
It is funny, I think, to your point, I think about Wally a lot when I look at the
Mhm.
current state of the world, particularly when it comes to the environment and how we treat ourselves. Something else I've really loved about Pixar, storytelling aside, is the animation quality just gets noticeably better and better with every movie. Even Inside Out 2, I was noticing improvements over Inside Out 1, thinking about anger. I need to see it again, but I swear I've seen, like, fire come off of his skin where I didn't remember that in Inside Out
Mm.
1, and it was coming off of him in very subtle ways. It wasn't, like, bursting flames, it was just a flare here and there during the close-ups. I just really appreciate the detail like that, and the water that they've been able to create, I think
Water is
that's always been a
always.
challenge. Yeah,
Yep.
but the place they're at now, it's, like, photorealistic. It's just amazing how
That's
good
the
it
crazy
looks.
thing is we're talking about all these feelings and emotions and things. I would even argue or posit that these movies make me more emotional than non-animated ones. Like these movies have
Mhm.
impacted me more than live action, many films actually.
Yeah, because in some ways, the sky is the limit. They can
That's true.
create anything that they want visually. Of course, it comes down to the storytelling too, but there's just so much more room for what they can create.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Inside Out 2. Now, listeners and viewers, believe it or not, nobody here had seen, besides me, had seen Inside Out 2 prior to a few days ago. And Laura and Eric were able to go and see it in the last few days. So thank you for doing that. And Micah just saw Inside Out 1. So I'm a little disappointed in the three of you that you didn't see it earlier, but it's okay. And I'm really glad that you did go and do some viewing ahead of this episode. And the reason I say that is because Inside Out 2 is now the highest grossing animated movie of all time, surpassing Frozen 2. Sequel Central. Ah. But what's interesting is that it blew past box office expectations. As a lot of people may know, there are these box office projections that come out in the weeks leading up to a movie. The studio tracks the movie to see how well the marketing's going and people's interest in a movie. And it seemed like it was doing okay, but it went on to do way better than anybody had expected. And people have been trying to figure out why it did way better. And my feeling is box office analysts could not have predicted the urge amongst us common folk to see a follow up to Inside Out 1, a film that mentally cuts deep. It is a therapy session with aspects like Bing Bong and leaning into your feelings. Inside Out 1 rocked me like no other Pixar movie has. And I think it had a big impact for a lot of people. And so I think people were looking for that therapy check-in with Inside Out 2. And box office analysts couldn't have predicted that.
I mean, yeah, but there's also so few movies I go and see in theaters these days. And but there have been, I really only strayed from that rule of just not going to the theater twice in the last week. I also saw Deadpool and Wolverine, but I rarely, if ever, go out. So maybe if others like me are sheltering at home, then the expectations, I think all box office predictors everywhere have had to cope with less overall turnout at movie theaters. It's why following Endgame, the MCU is just, also just not grossed as much because people are staying home. But Inside Out 2, I wanted to see it in theaters. I wanted to, not just to record this podcast episode about it, but I wanted that sort of happy feeling and that I wanted to cry in the darkness of a giant auditorium.
With
And a
popcorn.
visual treat like a Pixar movie on a big screen.
Yeah, exactly.
You're rewarded for seeing it in theaters.
Yeah.
Now,
Do you want to know the 1-2 punch I gave myself with this? So I actually had not seen Inside Out 1 until right before I went to theaters to watch Inside Out 2. So I was off on Monday and I was like, great, I'm going to watch Inside Out 1. We're going to get tickets. We're going to go see Inside Out 2. So watched it that afternoon, and that evening went to the movies. And I was pretty upset that there was no justice for Bing Bong.
No, he gone. He gone.
No, I refuse to believe it. They cannot leave us with that take her to the moon line and then not have Riley go to space camp or something. Like, what the heck? Come on, y'all. That Inside Out 3, you got to do it. There has to be justice for Bing Bong. So close that loop.
Maybe he'll get his own Pixar spinoff.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Check Disney Plus. They've done seriously a ton of 5-minute short things from every series that you love,
So Laura texted me Monday night. She said, okay, I am mad Bing Bong wasn't in the sequel. And I said, dude, Bing Bong is fucking dead.
Yeah. They replaced him with a pink cartoon character from Riley's earliest TV watching days.
Oh, yeah, that was funny.
He did kind of have a Voldemort-like death where he just kind of faded into oblivion.
It's
know.
True.
And it
Who's
was because
your friend who likes to play?
He let her go.
Bing bong.
Bing bong. God.
I know.
That killed me. Honestly.
Self-sacrifice.
Yes. That was, I cried. When we got to that part of the movie, we had to pause because I just welled up and started crying and was like, how could they do this to me?
But that's the trademark behavior of a friend, of a best friend. A true friend would be that self-sacrificing type. So the fact that Bing Bong did it is the perfect arc.
Oh, I know. It's tragic and beautiful at the same time.
But you're mad.
Yeah, but I'm mad.
That's fine.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, that's kind of one of my big takeaways from Inside Out 2 is that
no Bing Bong.
No,
Laura is scorched earth over this thing.
I'm pissed.
We'll get you a Bing Bong t-shirt.
No, but what I really liked that it did is that it impressed upon Riley, but also upon the viewer, that mixed emotions are a real thing and it's
Yeah.
okay to feel that way. So I can feel happy and sad about Bing Bong, right? And we see that by the end of the movie. Sorry, Micah.
Well, we see it at the end of
Riley,
the first one too. Or don't joy and sadness fuse together?
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a
but
very similar trajectory.
yeah, but I think there's more of an evolution in Inside Out too, and I think that's just part of Riley growing,
Mm.
right? Like
Mhm.
I love how with this series they're sort of tackling the sort of big buckets of growth that happen when you're a kid.
Just going back to the box office piece of it for a second, do you think a lot of it could be due to the fact that people were able to really identify with this movie coming out of the pandemic?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I
Eh,
think it has wider appeal even
Mm.
than some Pixar movies.
you're encouraged in Inside Out to let the joy in, to let happiness in.
Mhm.
And I think maybe to your point, Micah, about the pandemic, um, that is a real aspect. Sorry, I was just seeing a shadow in my blind. I was like,
It's
Oh, you're
Bing Bong.
fine.
"Fuck." It's Bing Bong.
Who's the
He's
one at
back and
Andrew's
he's
door?
pissed.
Bing bong, bing bong.
No, I'm telling you, that would be such a cool horror short. Somebody make it, please.
I think this episode's about to turn into a true crime documentary.
No, I love it. And again, like I love the juxtaposition. And again, that's something we see a lot in Pixar as well. It's
Yes.
beautiful.
So let's talk about more takeaways from Inside Out 2. But first, let's grab some tissues and take a quick break, and we'll be right back. All right, so we're back. Let's talk about Inside Out 2's portrayal of anxiety and what it looks like to have a panic attack.
I love the conceit that as Riley ages, new emotions emerge. That seems just natural, and was naturally fitting for a sequel to occur. But the way in which anxiety, in particular, who's sort of the one that gets center stage, really of the new emotions, the way in which they talk about her and handle her, and it really went straight to an early therapy lesson I had about we learn about anxiety, and the first thing to know about anxiety is, first of all, it's there to protect you, as a matter of fact. And so in the movie,
Mm.
seeing that there is a purpose and a reason for anxiety, war as we might against it throughout our lives, um, it's there for a reason. And that reason is initially pure or unassuming. And it's only when things go wrong that we have a problem with it. But just really A plus. I stayed for the end of the credits, which we'll talk about later. But I noticed that there are at least 4 doctors thanked, who I assume were consultants on the film.
Oh.
I mean, it makes
Mhm.
sense. It
Yeah.
makes sense that they'd consult um, medical doctors about this sort of thing, especially because of the subject matter of the film. But really, just from my lived standpoint with anxiety, I thought it was just incredibly well done. And in general, the marriage of the old emotions with the new emotions, and also showing that, like, the mom and the dad, whose heads we briefly see into in both films,
Which
are
is
not
always
without
funny.
anxiety. Yeah,
Yeah.
they it's not like retconned or anything. It didn't feel forced. It's just like anxiety normally has a time and a place, and it's big in adolescence.
The way they personify emotions and what's going on in your head and how these emotions interact with each other is mind-blowing. It is truly remarkable. It's Oscar-winning work. Like, it's just amazing how they convey how these emotions are working. These can be so hard to describe in therapy, in your own head, when you're trying to figure out what's going on, but Pixar just nails it. I think that's one of the most amazing parts of both Inside Out movies. And I guess part of it is this, it's a combination of great storytellers at Pixar, great animators at Pixar, plus these doctors who you mentioned, Eric. It really, that is my favorite part, I think, of the Inside Out movies.
And voice actors. I'd say everyone across the history of Pixar really gets it. They understand the assignment. I've never had any complaints about an acting portion of a Pixar film.
And the other
Mhm.
thing is just the way that the characters come across, right? How they're actually animated. I'm looking at a picture of Anxiety right now, and I watched the trailer for Inside Out too, and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, if I had to draw Anxiety, that's probably a little bit what it would look like
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like me at the end of every workday.
every workday.
I think what I also appreciate about it is that, totally get that they worked with doctors to make sure that they were portraying this stuff right. But I have to think that the writers were kind of bearing their souls here, right?
Yeah.
Because that, especially the panic attack as it was portrayed, was so on point. And I think about, because I used to have panic attacks when I was a lot younger. And if I, as a kid, had seen that represented, it would have made a huge difference for me when I had my first panic attack because I would have known what it was. It's a
Yeah.
really terrifying feeling when you've never seen it and you've never heard anyone talk about it. I mean, it can literally feel like you're dying. And to see them take that brave step and give kids an outlet and something that can prompt the question to their parent or to another trusted adult in their life, like what was happening to Riley and how should she have dealt with it? What's the best way to get through a situation like that? I mean, that has probably helped a lot of kids
That's
that
a
we don't
great
even
point.
know about.
She uses grounding techniques.
I also really loved the focus on who Riley is and kind of her core belief system about the world, but also about herself. And the way that they depicted all of our various experiences in life kind of stacking up to sort of build who we are and what our value systems are. And how even if you're a good person, you can also sometimes be selfish or mean or, other less than desirable adjectives if something comes along that kind of shakes the core of who you are. And I think that's so reflective of the experience of growing up, right? Like as kids, you're constantly kind of testing the boundaries and trying on different aspects of your personality to see what fits. And sometimes the results of that are negative. And I thought they did a really good job of depicting that in the movie too, to say, hey, even good people mess this up and it's
Mhm.
okay. It what really matters is the lesson that you learn from it.
Yeah, and mistakes happen. We all make mistakes, and
Mhm.
it's okay.
That's another good thing that what you said, Laura, reminded me too. Like Riley's friends show up and she is smart enough to give an apology, but they're also friendly enough. They're good enough friends to accept it. And that's where
Mhm.
the sort of catharsis and emotional pull comes from the film, to be able to see that Riley didn't ruin everything. And her actions and everything is just very hopeful for anyone who may be having trouble in real life.
I did want to ask though, it seems like the emotions that were introduced in this particular film are a little bit on the darker side of things.
That's interesting.
And this
Mm,
is from again, I've only seen the trailer and I only have read the emotions that come into play, but what does that say about us as individuals if we feel like these emotions of anxiety, ennui, embarrassment, and envy are the ones that really come about as we enter our teenage years? And I think this is kind of getting to a point that you have here, Andrew, about the lack of joy that kind of dissipates as we grow older. And
yeah.
it doesn't seem like we have as many fun and lighthearted type of emotions as maybe we did when we were younger.
Yeah, well, I think these new emotions that are introduced are reflective of what happens when you grow up. And you mentioned that line. There's this one particular line in Inside Out 2 where Joy says, I guess that's what happens when you grow up. You feel less joy. I think that was the line of the film. It was so
Yeah.
honest. And I think anybody in the theater watching that just goes, whoa, I can't believe Pixar just came out and said that. Cause like, it's true. I think
Ri-
for a lot of people,
Right in the jugular.
I
Mhm.
think I can definitely say I have felt less joy in my life as I've gotten older. And this isn't like
Yeah.
oh, poor Andrew, what are you okay?
No, no, no.
But it's like you still find moments of happiness and there's still things you love and enjoy and get joy from, but there's less of that. When you're a kid, everything's amazing except for
Yeah.
when mom doesn't give you your favorite snack.
But a lot of that is society. Like, it's the world in which we grow up that takes a lot of that away from us.
Look, there's a reason that coming of age is also referred to as the loss of innocence, right? You lose your ignorance. The shield, or barrier comes down, and you see the world for what it is. And yes, it's true that there are some dark and bad experiences you can have as you grow up, but there's a reason that joy is still one of the five emotions. Like joy does not
Mhm.
get joy does not take a side role or lesser role in this film just because Riley's a teenager now. Joy is with you your whole life. It's just, there may be more of a balancing act.
Right, competing with other emotions. Right, just
Mhm.
like we see in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, but as far as embarrassment, to kind of get to your question, Micah, like if you poll anybody about like what they felt in middle school, though, I bet you would find more disgust and more ennui and more envy and all that kind of. That's
Mhm.
just the hormones and things. I think these are the emotions that would be affecting a person of the age that the main character is in the film.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
love the hoodie that embarrassment
The
has.
embarrassment
Oh,
is
I
great.
know.
Embarrassment probably gets the second most large spotlight.
So
Yeah.
we also see Riley's deep dark secret in the movie. And
Yes, we do.
I did not realize there was a post-credit scene, but there is. I had thought for weeks after seeing the movie that Riley's deep dark secret was going to be found out in like the threequel, and it's going to be that she's a lesbian or something. But no, the deep dark secret is that she burned a hole in a rug. That's the post-credit scene. Eric, you said you stuck around for it.
Yeah, I stuck around for it. It gave me Back to the Future vibes because Marty McFly tells his parents not to get angry when their kid one day does that.
Hmm.
But no, I mean it's damage to home. You don't want to upset your parents. I think it's fine. I think it's good that it's like a light. It's Riley's
It
deepest, darkest
is.
secret. Like
Yeah, I
it's
get
not
it.
something worse. No, if you want a gay reveal, you got to wait until the directors and writers of Inside Out 2 do a show at Carnegie Hall, and then they'll talk about
They'll
the
admit,
sex
yeah,
shop.
we all well, in
Well,
all seriousness, Luca was actually those two characters were
Mm,
supposed to be interested in one another, but then Disney no homoed it. Like there's reporting on that. That really did happen, which is a
interesting.
bummer in part because when you watch that movie, you can tell there's something more there.
It's very Call Me by Your Name-ish.
Yeah.
well, I guess how did she burn a hole in the rug though? Was she doing drugs? Like, what's
Good
You're
question,
right.
Eric.
It
What
could be
we
no
don't
idea.
know? Mhm.
Save it. That's gonna be the sequel.
Right. I was going to say, is the next one in her teenage years when she's experimenting and, you know.
The
maybe
new emotions in Inside Out. Let's say 4 or 5. Let's give a chance for Riley to polyamory and
yeah.
Lust.
And
what are the
There
lust.
definitely, because of how successful this movie was, there will be a third. And I think on a future episode of What the Hype, we can talk about sequels and threequels and
Oh
what we think
yeah,
the future looks like for Pixar, because clearly it's the sequels that do really well for Disney and Pixar.
yeah.
But to look at Pixar more broadly, to wrap this up, I wanted to get everybody's favorite Pixar movie and why. I think for me, I said Inside Out 1 rocked me like no other. I have to go with Inside Out 1. That really changed my thinking on things in life. It was before I was in therapy. I had some mental health issues around that time. Like that movie cut me deep at just the right time.
They dare to imagine how structured something as wild as the human brain might be, and then build a whole town around it, or a whole environment.
Yeah. How they
Like
you're right, how they show the brain.
I
I
love
mean,
the
it's
it's
just so
tricky.
islands.
Fascinating.
The islands, yep.
Yeah.
And of course,
so
Bing Bong.
similarly, my favorite Pixar film does almost the exact same thing, Monsters Inc. And I've yet to talk
Mm.
about it, but even bigger than my life and experience with toys growing up was my fear of Monster in the Closet. I really had that. And the idea that it's this bureaucratic, boring 9 to 5 that the monsters are going and clocking in and going and scaring children and then going home totally made me feel safer at the time. And I just think, that one is fun to revisit anytime. Monsters Inc.
Good one.
I feel like mine's pretty obvious because I've brought it up a couple of times, but Wally is mine.
Aw.
I just think
Wally.
it is
Mm.
so relevant and in an eerie way, but at the same time there's a lot of beauty in it, in doing the right thing just because it's the right thing to do, even if you're not remembered for it. I just think it's a really, really beautiful movie and one that has really stuck with me over the years, for sure.
I think that would be my number 2 behind
Mhm.
Inside Out.
For me, it's Up. I just I love that movie. Eric, you were talking earlier about how it gets the waterworks going. It definitely does. And just the message of, it's never too late to travel the world. And the fact that Carl goes on this
Oh.
adventure, really on behalf of his wife, but that he also has a buddy that goes along with him. I love Doug and his whole squirrel campaign.
Squirrel!
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's another example of just did that character really need to be in the movie? No, but he helps to make it.
If they're
Well,
going
I
to
would
make you
kind of
laugh,
argue
they're going to
yes.
make you cry.
Exactly, because
Hmm.
right. So they'll make you cry, but they also want to have some lightheartedness throughout the movie and some genuine laughs.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you could argue Doug deserves to be there just as much as Carl. Well, that was fun talking about Pixar, y'all. Thanks for doing this with me. It's always nice to think about these movies.
It
Yeah.
was fun.
And it's nice to have such a wholesome conversation. That's what I love about Pixar. It talks about the beauty and the difficulty that can sometimes also happen in life, but it does it in such a human, relatable way. And it feels like going to therapy, just having had this conversation with y'all. So
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah. I was going to say, Laura, it's amazing that you can go from smut to Pixar in the span of 2 weeks.
Man,
Laura's
You're-
very versatile.
You're
Listen.
multi-talented.
And next week,
we've
House of the
done-
Dragon.
Yeah. I mean, y'all, we are all over the
What?
place. We're like Smut, Deadpool and Wolverine, The Boys, House of the Dragon, Pixar.
We have many layers.
I hope
We
they don't
do.
start to
Cuts the
blend in my
deepest.
mind. Otherwise, you get some
Well, we
weird
do have the
comments.
True Crime Pixar show that's coming.
Oh, I
I'm
can't
Yes.
wait.
so serious about
Who would we nominate to be like, this could be another segment on a future show, but like, who would be in our top 5 to be the murderer? Like
Sid
the villain.
from Toy Story.
Sid,
it's too obvious.
the biscuits,
Bing Bong.
Lotso Bear, Lotso Huggin' Bear. He ends up being a villain
You're
by
just
the end.
naming Toy Story villains. We're
Honestly.
just naming Toy Story villains here.
I
Yeah.
love the vibe of Bing Bong coming back, like Pet Cemetery style. Like
Oh
Bing Bong comes
no!
back.
Somebody buried him in the Indian burial bottom of your mind section.
Yep.
Randall Boggs from Monsters Inc. Him
Yeah.
or Stinky Pete. I googled fictional most evil Pixar characters. Zurg.
It's true. There's a
another Toy
disproportionate
Story
amount
one.
in Toy Story. It's very true. Don't know why, but it's pretty bad.
Woody's got to fight a lot of enemies. Well, this was a lot of fun. Listeners, don't forget to tell a friend about What the Hype and all of the various fandoms that we cover. Make sure you follow the show and are subscribed to wherever you listen or watch this podcast. And don't forget to comment and leave a review, and visit whatthehypepodcast.com for all the links you need pertaining to this show. So thanks, everybody. And that is The Hype about Pixar. Bye, everyone.
Bye, y'all.